So people, as you know, as you can see, we have the interior of Charles' mind, body, and soul laid out physically along this wall, and you can come here and you can spend minutes, days, weeks, or a long time with all the fabulous stuff. There are videos that Charles has chosen, and also some that he's in, explaining each part of the exhibition. There's stuff about his family. There's a lot of stuff about African roots and culture and how that is used in the community. And so, you know, you got to come back and spend a lot of time. Yes. But right now, you get to spend time with Charles and these illustrious folks. And Charles is going to introduce the people that need no introductions.
That's right. Thank you very much. First of all, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you. As was just stated, it's a lot of familiar faces, so we're all friends and family, so you make us feel very comfortable up here. And we'll try to get you out of here before it gets too late, but we're hoping as we have our discussion here, we're sharing our reflections, our experiences, but we know folks in the audience also have expertise, and so we wanted to also turn into a conversation, so for you to throw questions out, but also comments and just add on to the discussion. And so first I want to say I'm Charles Porter, for those who don't know me. I work in Skid Row. I've been working in Skid Row since 1999. Wow. And so I've been honored to be able to talk about my work in Skid Row, but as John mentioned, also just a little bit about my background and what I'm passionate about and what is important to me. And so our discussion today is we're uplifting the importance of our parks in Skid Row. And so we want to talk about how we use our parks in Skid Row to support health and wellness and just some of the amazing things that happen in our parks, because there's so much misinformation about Skid Row, and when people talk about Skid Row parks, they just assume those are places you should never go to. And so I'm gonna just tell a few stories, talk a little bit about the history, and encourage folks, as John mentioned, to check out the exhibit. It's here through the end of July, and there's a lot of layers to it. I can't tell you everything, not just a teaser, but there's a lot of information. And so it's not all me, it's also just our experiences, our stories, our victories as a community. And so I wanted to start out this discussion talking about parks and what they mean to parks and what they mean to me. And also I want to just give acknowledgement to some people that were really inspirational in some of the park work in Skid Row. So you may hear as the stories go around, some of the names come back again, but there are a lot of folks who have done really tremendous work in our parks that have never really been acknowledged or recognized. And I mentioned I got here in '99, so I'm sure there were people before me that were doing work. And so I don't claim to have discovered the parks. I did not. I was not the first. There were people before me, but in our work, I work for a drug prevention program, and the prevention work that we do really uplifts community connection as the opposite of addiction, and this concept of how connection and wellness and culture and heritage, all these things are kind of intertwined, and just opportunities for people to have a voice, to have representation. So you'll hear a lot of those stories tonight. So let me run through my notes real quick. So I was thinking about, so the exhibit is called Community and Cosmology. So cosmology is a big fancy word that really just means having a deeper understanding of everything that exists. Simple, just understanding everything that exists. And so what that means is that everything that you see has another layer, it has another meaning, it has another representation. And we find those out through our collective experiences. So that's really the wisdom of community, is hearing stories of what your experience was like and being able to share your personal experience, and that exchange and interchange is very powerful. But I was thinking, like, from a traditional African perspective, what a park would signify, what a park would represent. And in traditional African culture, my understanding, they have a concept of like the sacred grove which is very essential to a lot of traditional ceremonies and rituals. And the sacred grove is a place everyone in life has to go to the sacred grove at one moment, one point in time. And generally, it's a place that's part of your rites of passage as you go from becoming a boy to a man or a girl to a woman. You have to go to the sacred grove. And the sacred grove is a secret place. So no one talks about what happens in the grove, but when you come back from the grove, you're a different person. And so the sacred grove really represents a space of transformation where you leave and you come back different. And part of that is the reason why they maintain these sacred groves is to preserve a strong connection to nature. That the grove is literally like the bush. They also call it the bush. You go out into the bush and they believe in that space, there are entities that exist. There's energy that's there that's transformative. And so as people became urbanized, they had to preserve these spaces for people to connect and to reimagine who they are. So there's also stories of the older people that go to the grove, they also transform when they're there as well. So it's not just the new people, the new initiates. So the people who first timers, it's life changing, but people who go there regularly is also life changing for them. And so they also have new revelations about who they are, their place in the world. You leave the sacred grove and then you come back to the community. So that's another aspect of parks. Parks are a place to preserve nature, for people to connect with a deeper sense of who they are, their connection to the world, their purpose and place, and to have a transformative experience. But also, the other purpose of parks is to, in this interpretation, this is my interpretation. So parks also serve as a space to display publicly what you experience. So you're not going to tell people everything that happened in the grove, but when you come out of the grove, there's a festival, there's a celebration. So you celebrate the new initiates and everyone, they have opportunity to see who passed these trials, who went from boy to man or girl to woman, who did that. And so parks also are a place of performance. They're a place where you as a community reinforce what it means to be part of the community. And you're validated and acknowledged as someone who has achieved something, and someone who your existence has value. And so parks, they play in that context of dual spaces, a place that is for internal reflection and transformation, but it's also a space where you display who you really are and what you have accomplished, and you also get to, as a community, highlight what is valuable to the community. So those spaces also would be places where you would have ceremonies where people would come and drum and sing and dance. And so there are also spaces of renewal. So periodically there are festivals that are really designed to recharge the community, to cleanse the community, to reinvigorate the community. So for me, this discussion, it has that context, like the park is a space to learn, to experience refuge. It's a safe space to connect with the people, to connect with the land, to connect with nature, but it's also a place to display and show the world who you are. And so just putting that as a foundation for this conversation. And then I want to acknowledge just a few folks. I was on the phone earlier with Wendell, so folks know Wendell at San Julian Park. And I regret that I waited to the last minute to remember to invite Wendell, but I said, Wendell, oh my God, you gotta be here. Yeah. And he was like, nah, I'm about to lay down and I'm not feeling well. So he wasn't feeling well, so I hope he feels better. But I said, and it's funny because he kept trying to get off the phone, and I was like, one quick question. and he started telling stories, so I just want to convey, he really values his ability to be in the parks and to provide support at the parks. One of the things he said is that we need more lighting in the parks. He was like, tell them we need more lighting and we need to extend the park hours. So those are some requests he has. But his history, he said he's been working in parks for 30 years. So I was like, how long? I was like, 30 years? So one of the things he mentioned was that, and for folks that don't know, Wendell has a little table in San Julian Park. But I remember in one of these, I think Station 4, am I in Station 4? Yeah, Station 4, right here. There's some information about the parks, and there's like a park timeline, and just, like I said, I started in 99, so it's from what I know. And so SRO, Housing Corporation, used to manage the parks. And Wendell mentioned in San Julian Park, there was a staff member, Darlene Berry. So Darlene Berry used to manage San Julian Park. So she was really in charge of the park. In Gladys Park, there was Gary Lett and Darnell's last name was escaping me, but it popped in my head. Darnell Guy and Gary Lett were the two staff that were always in Gladys Park. And they pretty much maintained the parks, cleaned the parks. And so I also want to acknowledge their contributions. Darlene, SRO Housing Corporation, Darlene, Gary, Darnell, because everybody in the community knew them and the role Wendell played. The ownership of the parks transferred over to Wrecking Parks. It was, SRO had lost funding. I think when the CRA dissolved, the funding for the parks that went to SRO to maintain the parks, it disappeared, and so it went into operation of recreational parks. But recreational parks didn't have that institutional experience of what we do in the parks and who's who and who uses the parks. Originally, when we wanted to do events in the park, we had to go through SRO. We had to put in a park request use, and we had to beg them, please, can we use the park? But we had a good relationship with SRO, and so they were like, oh no, we know you're not going to do anything crazy in the park, it's fine, yeah. But you did have to get their approval to do events in the park. So we started organizing park committees. When SRO transferred their ownership of the park, we were concerned because we wanted to make sure we continued to have events and activities, and we didn't want some of the drug activity to get out of control. Because really, when you're talking about public spaces in Skid Row, they're very valuable spaces because people don't have public spaces to come together and just be yourself. Everyone is really kind of competing for space. And you have folks that are in these little units and they don't really have communal space. So parks are very important. So, but there are a lot of people competing for the use of the park space. And so we wanted to make sure we tried to fill those spaces with folks that were focused on doing positive things that uplift the community, that support health and wellness. And we wanted to make sure we advocated for increase in programming and organization, and so we started a park committee, and then our park committee, we just advocated to support what was happening in both parks, and that later transformed. Let me go back to my list. I'm going getting besides myself, so I'm giving shout outs. I'm gonna read these names and then I'm gonna introduce the speakers because I already feel myself going long. You know, Henriëtte made the mistake though of telling me that I could take as long as I want. So I'm in a real comfortable space, but what is it called? My inner metronome is ticking for the film that I need to stick to the script. Okay, so I gave a shout out to a few of the folks. One person that I really have to give a shout out to, rest in peace, she just had a birthday too on April 12th, Leslie Kroom. So Leslie Kroom, she worked with UCEPP. She first, in Skid Row, I think she first started working at the Volunteers of America, the drop-in center. She was a really powerful advocate for community, for recovery, for wellness, for empowerment, just really strong personality, strong voice. A lot of folks that know her, you never forget Leslie. But Leslie was the first person that I really saw advocating for resources for our parks. And she would always share these reports. It was out of my scope. I'm like, why do you keep sending me these reports about park equity and funding and resources? And her thing was that our parks here should be getting more than what they're getting. We don't have dedicated funding. We don't have all the ideas we had. There was no funding for it. And she was like, all the good stuff we want to do, why don't we have a dedicated funding source? And she was the first person that really got us to start talking to the Board of Commissioners for Recreation and Parks. And she even, General Jeff is another really strong park advocate. Actually, rest in peace, they're actually in the process now of renaming Gladys Park after General Jeff. But Leslie actually introduced General Jeff to that process of this is where you go to advocate. These are the people you need to talk to. And as a community, we were able to use that platform and to show up at meetings that they didn't expect people to show up to and say, excuse us, we're coming from Skid Row and our parks need more. Okay. We have a small list of demands, and that has been really powerful in what you see today at our parks. And that's the other thing I want to just highlight, that what you see in the parks didn't just happen. It came from advocacy from folks that are in the room and from some of the folks that I'm mentioning who are no longer with us. So General Jeff is one. OG, gotta give a shout out to OG and Coach Ryan. OG had a whole crew of folks that were always in the park. And they tried to do a lot of stuff. Not everything came to fruition, so OG's one of them people that takes credit for everything. Like he had this concept of jazz, we're gonna have jazz in the park. And jazz in the park, because my office is right next door to the Gladys Park. And it started out as a great idea, like, okay, we're gonna play jazz music, introduce people to the music, and just create a whole vibe, but it transformed into something else. So like, what are they? What are you playing? Excuse me, sir, that is not jazz. And so, but in everything that we do, we've always incorporated music, and so, but he saw the value of music, and that was really his original vision. We need to have a bunch of stuff happening in the parks all the time. And so the 3-on-3 Street Ball League, and in the future there'll probably be more discussions about the Street Ball League. It still exists, but it's not really in its prime. But there's some footage online just about the Street Ball League, and OG also did and Michael Blaze is another one. Michael Blaze, they did he did a lot of work with fathers, and they did the Father's Day events, and Juneteenth. OG actually did a Juneteenth event with his Father's Day event. Big Mama, she's on my list.
Oh.
Yeah, Angelia Harper. So, and they just did an event last weekend, spring event. So they've been doing it pretty regularly. Angelia Harper, I mentioned Michael Blaze, Kevin Michael Key. So Kevin Michael Key is another one, rest in peace, who just advocated for supporting recovery resources, having events and programming. I think Alisa's going to talk more about our fight for the toilets in the park. And so just a strong advocate, and just something that we as a community have to remember. Kevin Michael Key also was when he passed away, a petition was circulated to name something after Kevin Michael Key.
Right.
And we never followed up with that. We gotta get back to figuring out what in the neighborhood we name after Kevin Michael. Because people were like, yeah, sign the petition. And but Kevin Michael was instrumental in parks and just a lot of community spaces, but just that's something that we have a responsibility to continue to uplift the work that he did. Also, Eddie H. Was another strong advocate for our community, for our parks. Miss Eunice, she also passed away. Eddie H., rest in peace. Miss Eunice passed away. She advocated also for parks. Walter Fears was also a strong advocate.
Yeah,
so
the drummers.
a lot of people know Walter. He relocated to Africa, so we'll see him again one day, this Walter.
He's having his second child.
Oh, wow. That's a blessing. Tom Grody's on this list too. Tom Grody was around, this guy in the front row. Shout out to Catherine too. Catherine has always been involved in just, and her commitment also to increase in this whole concept of green space and trees and plants. And an ecosystem, the stuff that's very, very essential. So some of the other folks on the panel, I don't need to give them shout outs because they're right here and we'll hear from them in a second. The other thing I want to say is a kind of sensitive topic, but I will do my best to professionally present this. There are also people who are very committed to utilizing, and when we first started doing outreach in the park and we started involving young people. So one other thing I want to highlight about this exhibit too is that this sound system you see right here, this is our original OG sound system that we used to take to the park when we did events. Well, we used to take young people to the park, and at the time people didn't have the Bluetooth speakers and where everybody was playing music. So we had a monopoly on that. We were the only ones that could get on the mic and be louder than everybody else. The power in that is that you can be louder than everyone else and still talk in a soft voice. So when people are yelling at scary, please be quiet. There's something psychologically powerful. It's like the voice of God. It's like, is that the voice of God? No, it's just Charles. But could you please be quiet? And so what I used to stress upon the young people were that this is a captive audience, but we have to respect this space. To the point I just mentioned, people go to parks for various reasons, but part of it is just so they could be themselves. And so we don't want to impose upon that. So what we had to do is say, we're coming here once a week. We just want to play music with y'all, share some messages. We have some young folks here. We're just uplifting the parks as positive spaces, and we hope you enjoy it. And so we would just play music and start doing our thing. And after a while, they started to embrace it, but we came in respectfully. We didn't come in and say, we got a park full of people, we're going to tell you what we want you to hear, and we're going to take over. And so I want folks just to keep that in mind, because that's very important, that we are, we talk about trauma informed, but we have to be responsive. When you know these are the few spaces that people gather, don't come in there and take it over. Like, if you want to come in there, partner with the people that are there. And so what happened with us when we would play music, people would come up and bring songs. Well, who was that? Okay, you ever heard this? And like, they helped develop some of the playlists that we had. It was all interactive. And I always make jokes. There were a few folks that was, at first, they were like, turn the music down. We can't hear the cops coming. And it was like, no, you gotta cut that out. And then other folks was like, no, it's cool. I like it. Like, keep it up. And so it was this whole negotiation thing. And it's like, okay, we only gonna be here for 2 hours. Okay, 2 hours, that's cool. You good. And so, but there are some churches, this is my nice way of getting into the church discussions, that they utilize the spaces to have church service, and they opened up church in the park. So I have to give acknowledgement to the fact that they provide resources. People like the fact that they bring resources. People appreciate they bring music and singing. And so I have nothing negative to say about that. And Pastor Tim Park, he used to do a lot of events in Gladys Park, I think every Friday, as I'm right next to it. And they would just set up, and matter of fact, they would take over the basketball court and just have church. And so I don't know how that happened, but it's freedom of speech. I guess you're allowed to set up church in parks. And so Pastor Tim is one, and then there's Restoration of Hope. But they do a women's safe haven event the last Saturday of each month in St. Julian Park. So I just give a shout out because they came through, consistently fed folks and gave resources to people, and people appreciated it. Not everyone appreciated it, but the people that didn't appreciate it, they didn't really have anyone to say, oh, not everybody wants to be a part of your church at this time. So it's a delicate discussion, but I have to acknowledge the significance that they did contribute to adding programming to the park. And so, but anyone has an idea opening a church in the park, just be respectful that there's people already there that may not believe in what you believe in, and bring resources and get in and get out.
I keep it down a little bit. It's so loud.
Yeah, I won't go into some of it. Okay, since you started, Ari, I was trying to avoid this, but there's one story though I did get into it with. One of the groups one time, they were having church, and we had a permit to use the park. And we had to negotiate using the park because they had church there. And it's like, we don't care if you have a permit. We have church here every week. And it was like, okay, but do you have, it was delicate. We worked it out, you know, just conversation. You can work anything out with conversation. But you just triggered an experience that. All right, so let me see, I gave my shout outs. So we use our parks to support events, festivals, movies, health fairs. The Park Advisory Board I mentioned is really historic. General Jeff played a major role in us advocating to be officially recognized as the city as a Skid Row Park Advisory Board. I think it may be one of the only Skid Row institutions recognized by official political body. So that's pretty historic. We struggle now just to keep it going and expand participation, but it's a work in progress. It just started in 2020. And so I'm one of the board members of the Park Advisory Board. So just encourage folks to participate, get involved. There's actually space on the board. So folks that are interested, let me know. I'll let you know how to get, how to participate. And the last thing I'm gonna say before I really pass the mic, I'm really gonna pass the mic. I just wanna share a little bit from a survey that we did. So during the pandemic, we did a survey about stress and coping and how people were responding to the pandemic. But we asked some really specific questions about our parks. And so we were able to capture some park information just from people who use the park. There were also some people that didn't use the park, so that's the other thing too, is this view. There was some people who was like, well, what do you think about San Julian Park? I'm not going to San Julian Park. Have you been there? No, they said to kill people there. I'm not going. So it's like, okay. And so it's a whole public awareness thing about our parks and Skid Row and what really happens there. So you're about to hear some stories of what, not to say that negative things don't happen, but that's not the norm and that's not what always happens. And that's anywhere, not just Skid Row. But we asked folks, people experiencing homelessness with the survey was targeted. So the top 5 reasons why you people visit Gladys Park. Number 1 on the list was the use of the restrooms. And so that's important to note because a lot of communities are closing their parks to people experiencing homelessness. They lock the bathrooms up, they put chains up and find ways to keep people experiencing homelessness out of the parks. That's one thing unique about Skid Row. We do the opposite. We find ways to make the parks more responsive to people experiencing homelessness. How can we increase restroom access, expand it? How can we have Wi-Fi, charging stations? How can we have activities, events, resources, public health resources, access to water, access, all the things that people need? How can we support that? And so I think our parks really set a model nationwide for what can be done to support people experiencing homelessness. Number 2, that people came to the park, to Gladys Park specifically for the events and organized programming. Number 3 was to get exercise. Number 4 was to spend time with family and friends. And number 5 was to charge their phone. And so you see how important little thing, bless you, as charging your phone is very important. So we asked the same question for San Julian Park, people who went to San Julian Park. The top 5 reasons. Number 1 was for the events that people came for the park events or for organized program. So if people were doing an event in the park, it's like we show up when you do events. Number 2 was to use the restroom. Number 3, spend time with family and friends. Number 4 was to get water or to use the water filling stations. So that's another thing people don't even think about, water access and how essential that is. And then number 5 was to get exercise. So I just want to uplift just the voice of the people that utilize the parks. And so, and then they also in that survey did talk about some recommendations for how to improve the park. And their top, for both parks, the top 5 things that they wanted was, number 1, the restrooms. They want the restrooms to be better. And part of that is also extending the access, which relates to park hours and those type of things, and keep them clean and stocked. Number 2 is staffing. They want more staff in the park. And that is also an opportunity to create jobs for community members. So that's something that we can advocate for. Number 3 was security, and we know security is a sensitive conversation, but security also relates to having staffing. Security and safety, having people there that are able to make you feel comfortable, but also respond if there's an incident. And so that was noted by people we surveyed. Number 4, drinking fountains. So the water access, they want it improved. Number 5 was more benches and tables, just places for people to sit down and do what they do. So I want to uplift that as well. The other ones that I want to mention too is just keeping the park clean, cleaning litter removal, and then after that was public art. So people wanted to see more art in the parks. So on that note, okay, let me get back to, we got a lineup right here. Let me see, I gotta go back to my notes here. On my list, I'm going to, first we're gonna have Mr. Christopher Mack speak, and then Hayk, and then Alisa, and then Henriëtte. And they're gonna talk about their work in the parks, their experience, and first they're gonna tell us who they are, and then they're gonna just talk about what they do in the park and how it supports the neighborhood. So I'm gonna stop talking for now. Thank you very much.
Give me the mic, give me the mic, give me the mic. I first got down here in 2003, so it was February 3rd, 2003, so I've been down here for like a couple of years. And when I got over there to use, because I was community outreach for Wesley, and so what I was working on was I was working on an HIV survey, which was, I had a questionnaire to find out who you were having sex with, and you know, back then the down low was trending, you know, whether or not you had a down low, and I had to ask people, you know, those intimate personal questions. And so it was, you know, you go to a park with a guy who's big and buff, and you say, sir, I'd like to ask you, are you having sex with men and women? And then, you know, that was kind of like really edgy. But then I met Charles Porter and Kevin Michael Key. And so they would always say, hey, Chris, come here and go to this thing, go to this. I said, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. Then all of a sudden I'd end up where Kevin Michael Key and Charles Porter were. And you know, the thing about, if you saw Charles Porter and Kevin Michael Key, they would want to see who's going to hold the mic the longest. Give me the mic, give me the mic, give me the mic. But the one thing that when I got down here, the main idea was this was a community. You know, we were fighting against a narrative that was constantly, you know, Skid Row as being a containment zone. And every time we showed up, we showed up understanding and knowing that it was a community. I still got a shout out to Sean and to Dogon, because you know they put work in on the front line all the time. Something was happening, LAK would be there. Fuck the police! Fuck the police! I said I can't stand with you guys for a little bit. You know, I said, hey, it doesn't matter whether it was Villa Ragosa, Garcetti, anything. They would be adamant. And when we go into City Hall, but this is the activism, but that I ran into when I came here, and that was the beauty of the community. OG Man, whether y'all know it or not, he had the Skid Row Street Brigade. Yeah. What they did was they went outside and went up to San Francisco and bought Urban Alchemy down here to do the very same thing that OG was doing in 2005. When I first came down here, there was no tents. You know, you could walk all the way down 6th Street, unimpeded, no tents on 6th Street, no tents on San Pedro, no tents, period. And when the people had to sleep in cardboard, and so they had cardboard condominiums, but you know what? What's amazing to me is to constantly see the same people that put in fight. You know, Linda Lee, the artist. You know, this community is rich with art and artists, and how conscientious they are of humanity. You see, the one narrative that they always been throwing around is mental health and substance abuse. Sometimes people just want to be left alone. You know, they want to be left alone, but they also want their own autonomy, self-governance. So when people be talking about housing, I want to house you, I'm going to house you here, I'm going to house you there, they're only telling the people about shelter. They're not talking about housing where the person can go in and become at home, self-governing himself, where he has his own key. He doesn't want to have somebody pointing to him and saying, you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way. He wants his own autonomy. And when the systems start talking about housing to people, they're actually talking about shelter, and they're actually talking about taking away that very thing that they really want and really need. And so I'm telling you, I'm here, I'm watching this, because what I did was I also had several programs. When I worked on Wesley, the first program was HIV. Then I became an HIV counselor and tester. Then I became a facilitator of Group for Wellness, you know, which I was telling people about, you know, asymptomatic transmitted sexual disease and prostate exams and colonoscopies. And so I was doing male wellness with men in recovery homes. But the greatest thing I did was working on the BEST program, Benefit Entitlement Specialist Team. And what we did was people who qualified for SSI, when you go to apply for SSI and you have to take 9 months, 10 months, rejected, and then all of a sudden you start, we had an 87% rate on the beginning. But what I learned was that the condition of homelessness is a social economic condition brought on by policies and politics of people with means. And if we don't start talking through that lens, it's nothing gonna happen. Because when people start getting SSI as opposed to $221 and $200 in food stamps, they start to live better lives. We don't talk about thriving, we talk about just sustaining. I think people want to thrive, and they deserve to thrive. People are precious, people are priceless. And so what I really begin to do is in community, you get that support. And the parks, every time that they would have something at the park, like I love the park, the 3-day festivals, I love those things because I've been to a few of them, and it's where you get a chance to meet other people in the community with like minds. And let me tell you something, you don't even have to talk to those people, you just be around those people, and there is something that happens, and that's the magic of connection, because you have something that you share together. And I love this community because guess what? I'm a member of several communities. I don't know if you guys understand that, but you're always a member of 7 communities, 8 or 9, 10 communities. Everybody belongs to a multitude of communities. And so the community that I have here, I'm able to share the wealth of that community, and when I come back, I'm able to share the wealth of another community from that community, because guess what? I'm conscientious and I have respect for people. Period. I have love for people. Period. They don't have to be me. That's one of the things about it is when I start to see people, Charles, and here's one of the things I have to say about Charles Porter is, you know, the building can be on fire and falling down around him and stuff, and he just has that very pleasant smile. And I've never seen nobody just so even keel. You know who else do that kind of stuff? Hayk, you know, something. And Alisa, wait, they have that big smile. You say, damn, don't they see that the sky is falling and shit? Don't they see that? And then when you have that relationship, but another thing I like to talk about is the thing that UCEPP and LA Can, they're always trying to promote wellness for the community by asking for things that the community could use. I remember when at LA Can, they used to have the Thursday, you know, they used to have the Thursday boombox session, and they used to have the garden, which they bring down fresh vegetables and fruits, and then they would steam the spinach and kale and stuff like that. That place is beautiful. That's what happens when you share food, you share friends, and all of those things. But one thing I want to say about this, and then I'm gonna pass it to whoever's next. There is an emancipation circle that Charles did a few years back. man, you know, God's trying to tell you something. I always remember that. And in that emancipation circle, there was this notion to defy the lie. We're being lied to every day we wake up. There are 4 ways of deception. There's cognitive dissonance, there is propaganda, there is hyperbole and hypocrisy. And those are the 4 levels of deception that we're always facing. Not to mention the worst addiction is denial. And when you try to tell somebody the truth about something and they deny it, you better get away from that person, because this is a very dangerous person, because he's going off with something else. But the emancipation circle has gave me an awareness and has gave me a truth that I don't have to ask anybody's permission to be alive, because it tells me that, you know what, you're here. Make the best of it. And defy the lie wherever it is being said. I'm not a second-class citizen, and neither are you. And so I love this community because it gives me meaning and purpose, and it helps me to evolve and develop spiritually, because it always sends me running to the internal Christopher that I have to always nurture and care for.
All right. It's hard to follow, but also really easy.
That was hard to follow.
But also amazing transitions. Thank you. My name is Hayk. I have been doing things in Skid Row since 2008, and I am 39, about to be 40, which means that for half of my conscious life, I guess, whenever conscious life starts, I'm not sure. I had to consult someone on that, but I've been doing some things that are Skid Row related, and I'm a first-generation immigrant. I came to the United States from Armenia, from Southwest Asia, also known by the colonial name, Middle East. So that means that really more than half of my time in this country, I've been doing something that's, that's in Skid Row. And so I say that because that's something that's on my mind now more often about, so like, as I think about what I'm doing in hyper-local places like Skid Row or maybe parts of Armenia, for instance, and how we relate to the whole world in those connections, hyper-local and global, and how those relate to each other and our identities. I do want to jump right into the parks, but I can't miss the opportunity to sort of like go off of what Chris was saying, because I'm reading right now this book on Black Marxism by Robin Kelly, and one of the things that he says, like, 20 years ago, when I was younger, I thought it was so simple, just a revolutionary socialist movement with commitment to anti-racism and anti-sexism and anti-imperialism. That's all we need, And then I was like, I understood that, that it's still that, but how we get there is a journey that's not a straight line. Perhaps, so like picking up the energy from what you were saying with the Emancipation Circle, to be okay with that. Because I think I've been there, I still am there often, where I'm like very frustrated. Why doesn't everyone understand that this is it, like just, revolutionary socialist movement. I think such an important part to it for me is to be able to focus on what may seem like small things, but I think are actually such fundamental parts of who we are as human beings and how community gets formed, which is sort of like this little, again, I say it with a big asterisk, but they are like, like 1 hour, 2 hours of art making together with people can seem like a little thing, and yet when you add consistency and some level of like thinking through of how it connects to a little larger community and a little larger community and a little larger community, yet all of a sudden that 1 or 2 hours can be a lot more than just 1 or 2 hours. I've done things in the park for years. When I was running Studio 526, Studio 526 still exists, an awesome community art space in the Skid Row neighborhood. Most of my introduction to Skid Row, or more than just the introduction to Skid Row neighborhood, has been while I was facilitating that space, just kind of giving context for folks who might not know. For the last couple of years, been doing a couple of other things, moved on from that space. While I was at that space, that was probably my first sort of like interaction with the parks, as I was collaborating with John and Henriëtte and Charles and a bunch of other people with the annual festival for all Skid Row artists. I just want to kind of like to note how my connection to the parks got started. And now I want to kind of just maybe share a few things about what's been happening in the last year and a half, 2 years with the Doodles Without Borders, which one of the ways that Doodles Without Borders exists, or I would say a central way for now and probably for quite a while still, is this presence in the parks, specifically at General Jeff, soon to be General Jeff Park, because bandwidth, you have to choose your battles. Be like, okay, I'm gonna be there, and it's weekly arts table at the General Jeff Park, Thursdays 3 to 4:30 p.m. And being in the park on a consistent basis, being anywhere consistently, and doing something that's cyclical, that keeps going, whether it's weekly or monthly or yearly. Those of you that know me know I particularly like those kind of cyclical things, events, activities, and I'm drawn to them. And so that was sort of like a no-brainer. The way that what happens when you do something weekly, those of you that are in specific buildings and maybe out, wherever you are, whether it's indoors or outdoors, if you're doing things on a weekly basis, you know it. You have office hours, you have ways for people to find you and predictably know that you're going to be there. And the smallest element, I would say, is weekly. The moment you have once every 2 weeks, it's like, oh, which week is it? Is it there, is it not there? Just want to kind of give a little bit more meaning to why weekly and not something else. Could be monthly too, but monthly is also oh my God, when is he going to be here next time? Is it still, which is it third Thursday of the month? Is it weekly is easier. And so when I left Studio 526, it was important for me to maintain contact with a number of people at the, in the neighborhood. That was one of the impetuses for the Doodles Without Borders, and a weekly thing means that I don't care whether a person's phone, they lost their phone, whatever happens, because that does happen, of course, and whatever else, that's, it's easy to remember, this particular time there. Weekly now being in the parks, what happens when you are in the park on a weekly basis? I know 3 different, and there are probably more categories. So one, you get regulars, and regulars at first are folks that you've known before, and they just kind of want to hang out, which is amazing, of course. And then there are new folks who are oh, what is that table? And I know. And I've had this thing that's been happening where I come through the park and I kind of, not everyone, but with a number of people in the park, I kind of just give a nod, and I don't know folks personally. Some folks I do now, some folks I don't, and of course a lot of folks are okay, this person nodded, whatever. And then inevitably, when it's the 3rd time and the 4th time and the 5th time, someone nods back, and then I'm okay. And then someone is already in a way being informally, I call it informal support, where someone's oh, that's your spot, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's my spot, and I don't have to say anything. Okay. So regulars, and I want to kind of just mention a few names. One person that a lot of you have known, Frank, rest in peace, was it was a regular at the park for years, and those that know him much longer than I do also know him through the hotel next door and like hangouts over there. I know him through the park mostly, and when the tabling, like I started Duels Without Borders, that how, having a person that's like, the moment you come into the park, kind of like just flags you and just heads over, and there's a routine, and he's like, I know exactly what kind of tea he wants, and pouring him a cup of tea is so like that can make your day, and that also creates this kind of structure in a way that not very few things can. Then there are some other regulars from folks who have been with the studio for a while. I want to mention specifically, and I'm sure I'm missing some more folks too, but Kaoko, Eiko, and Vicky, and I believe Vicky is here. There she is. It's amazing. Thank you. People coming regularly, day in day, almost every week or whatever, like at whatever pace is amazing. And then of course there are new folks, and I didn't really know Pearl that much, but now I know Pearl because I feel that she's one of the regulars at the park, and she found us, and and now she's like. Now she's the person who comes like, I'm so sorry I can't. I'm like, it's okay, don't worry, you don't have to come today. It's like, I can't make it today. It's okay. So regulars, supportive collaborators. I already talked about informal support. Informal support also happens through those increasing number of nods, and it happens when park staff sort of like comes and unsolicited tells you, one of the folks, I can't think of his name, but the Latinx guy who was like one of the cleaners there, he like came over and he was like, I'm gonna tell them to extend the park hours because this needs to happen more, and like, I'm like, yeah, tell them. I don't know who them are, I'm not sure who you report to, but yes, please. And also, I don't promise that I'll be coming longer if the park hours are extended, but I will advocate with you because that's important, and I agree with it. And so yeah, informal support. Supportive collaborators, I just thought of one particular person, Koi, who I'm looking at Charles because I think Charles knows those folks, and I imagine some of you know some of those folks as well. Yeah, she came over one time and she was like, those kids over there, they're not doing anything. Give me that paper. And she was like, you have to draw on that paper. We're like, we don't want to draw. Like, no. She came back with a bunch of drawings, and I still have those drawings. Yeah. Someone was like, okay, you want me to draw? And and I forget what there was a phrase. It was just a word. But it was like, money. I'm like, hey, yeah, that's right. So yeah, Koi has done that a couple of times now, but there was like this particular day, I think she was like just also, that was, whatever was happening in her day, she was like, I need to do this, we had also like, because now there's like people who know that I'm regularly there, people who like would come and be like, hey, this person, there was a couple of times that this happened, but like I'm thinking of a particular time when someone definitely was not having a good day, and I didn't do anything really. It was just Koi came over and she was like, I need some materials, and she went and she was like talking to this person who was definitely not having a good day, and I'm not even sure if he actually needed the sketchbook and paper and materials, but that was like the tool that worked at the moment to sort of to show support for that person. And the fact that we were there and they knew, and Koi knew that we were there, was sort of like created this kind of collaborative intervention with sketchbook and pencils. Yeah, and so those three things. And before I pass the mic, one thing I want to note, there are so many thoughts, but music. And the thing with music is really amazing now, because now people do have boomboxes and Bluetooth. And I always have a little speaker that I bring, and if there isn't music, or the music is like at the other end and it's like a little low, then I'll turn on something. But more than half the time, I don't have to turn on anything because there's already music, there's already a soundtrack, and it's pretty awesome actually to be like, to notice that and to verbalize and be like, hey, we got music already, so we're just gonna do our thing. Thank you. All right.
Wait, before you pass the mic, maybe you want to talk a little bit about.
Oh yeah, I got so excited I forgot about, I have a whole display here. So one of the things that we've sort of like been, I forget how exactly it started, but it has been now an important piece of what Doodles Without Borders does, is that banners and different type of like signage or whatever, like visuals that are colorful, that are connected to community activities and events that we do. In fact, the way that the table operates is that there's always some sort of collaborative thing happening, and there's always some materials for people to do, to do things individually as well. But yeah, that's what's been really awesome. Before I get to a couple of the individual banners on here, was to sort of at some point realize, and this is not even all of them, there are a couple of more, that we have like a little bit of a, I don't know what you call it, like we have a portfolio of banners now. And it's been really awesome to put out one or two of them. Like I put at least one, definitely, when we were there, and depending on the day, maybe a couple of them every time we're there. And of course, we love the idea. I love the idea, and so like I say, it's a we because it's always as you heard, number of people at the table, and part of the we is a little bit. I think it's important to say it, aspirational too, because I think some things sometimes are a very relatively small group of people. Sometimes it's relatively small group of people of one person, but I think it's important to recognize that is something that is part of a cycle that then grows and stuff. I think it's, as someone who's been organizing circles, and sometimes they're very easy to be like, oh, like only 2 people came to this organizing meeting, forget this, fuck this, we're gonna just like, no, that's how it works. It's like, and then you do a couple more, and then it builds up again, or whatever it is, the dynamic. So there are now 2 banners that are tied specifically to Skid Row's Black History Month celebration. And we're kind of like going with the themes, so reclaiming our power right here, and Skid Row celebrates heritage of the Black diaspora over there. And I'm realizing that we're gonna start counting years by that, because 2, 3, 4. What's been there's one that's on the table. You can see it very well. It's called Skid Row Connected. That's like hashtag. Charles talked about opposite of addiction is connection, and sort of like this connections is a very important thing. Again, I actually don't know exactly what's the origin story of the hashtag. All I know is that at some point I was like, oh, this hashtag, and that was actually
COVID. I think during COVID we came up with that.
Yeah, we just started just sharing it, and when we do our events, we try to link it in as well. Just that concept.
The concept, exactly, and that was our first banner. That was the first one, and yeah, we notoriously sometimes work real long on banners too. Like some banners were like took 4 months. And other times that we really need to crank out in a few weeks, we can sometimes do it. But yeah, just in case ever any of you are thinking like, oh, next week we need this banner. We are making one for next week specifically. That was like a abstract and specific at the same time. Every now and then we can do it, but most of the time it takes time for these things because of the process. Basically, it's like everyone kind of adds at their own pace and whatever else. That sign is always at the table. Anti-capitalist, anti-racist, free community water and coffee. Yeah, it's sort of like it's I guess I started with it and maybe like wrap up with it as well. For me, one of the things that I'm interested in, and I am not sure exactly like how and where it would lead. I'm not the first or the last one, obviously, to be bringing explicit political messaging to arts. There's an entire legacy, and yeah, it's something that's important for me, and it's interesting to kind of like also be explicit about messaging that invites people to be thinking about their politics and whatnot, and at the same time not like preachy about it. So I don't have the answer how to do that, but trying to figure it out. But collectively, exactly. When we mention collective liberation, that's already whether you want it or not there. All right. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Before I pass to Mike, I did want to say something real briefly. You reminded me of the regulars, and there were a few, when we do events in the park, there were a few songs that I always had to play. So Wendell has his theme song, that's Happy. If you're ever in San Julian Park doing an event, Wendell's gonna make you play Happy. You gotta play it at least once. And then in Gladys Park, there was a young lady, Angel, and she had a song, Closer. It's a song by Gawapali. It's on, I think it's on my playlist. But that song, you couldn't do an event without playing it. And she would just come from nowhere, and like the event could be about to end, and she just taps you. Did you play my song? Huh? Yeah, you didn't play my song. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll play it right now. And then there was a song General Jeff gave me that he wanted me to play too. But General Jeff was just, you know how General Jeff was. He was like, hey, when you do events in the park, you should play this song. And then he just kind of left it with me. And that was a Sly Stone song, We Can Make It If We Try. So he told me whenever, put it in the playlist. So I just want to acknowledge that there were folks that were like, you had to play certain songs. So that's the beauty of community. So I'm gonna pass the mic to, I said Alisa, but Dr. Alisa RD. I gotta throw that title. You got to put some respect on her name. She's done a lot for our community, been a strong ally, supporter, advocate, and I'm gonna let her do her thing.
Thank you everyone. I'm gonna try to switch it up a little bit by showing some pictures. So one of the things I started teaching this semester, so I hope I didn't over prepare, so I'll just keep it simple and show the pictures. One thing I'm just quickly in thinking about the presentation, I remember when Brother Charles did his opening, and I really like this, the banner here, the Skid Row celebrates the heritage of the Black diaspora. Because Brother Charles, you said something during your opening, making this like it was like across time and across space, the connection with Skid Row and the Black tradition, and that's what is kind of ringing up for me when I talk about the parks tonight. So one, just the importance of urban parks. These are just talking points that you already know as advocates, and people are like, as we already heard in some of the stories, but parks are important to all of our lifestyles. Reducing health costs, strengthening local economies, creating jobs, making cities more resilient, increase community engagement and reduce crime, clean the air and improve public health, and also tools for cities to achieve their equity goals. And that's something I think the advocacy here in Skid Row is really trying to do, to say, how come our parks aren't supported the way that other parks are in other neighborhoods? And this is just something, looking at, there was a study that came out by an organization called Child Trends, and to summarize it, they looked at 4 conditions of neighborhoods that impact like the future well-being of children, and one was access to parks. And the lack of having parks in communities really does contribute to adverse health effects long-term. So when we think about children, or we think about people who don't have access to parks, how can we rectify that and some of the diseases that come up when you don't have such access? So Urban Oasis, so again, this is just within the Black diaspora. Bell Hooks, I just want to read a quick quote from her. The late Bell Hooks, I should say. She's just one of my mentors. And she talks about this concept of a home place. What is that? You're in one. These kind of semi-public home places where people can gather, and they're sites of resistance. She said, for those who dominate and oppress us, benefit when we have nothing to give our own, when they have so taken from us our dignity, our humanness, that we have nothing left, no home place where we can recover ourselves. So she says, historically African American people believe that the construction of home place, however fragile and tenuous, had a radical political dimension. Despite the brutal reality of racial apartheid or domination, one's home place was the site where one could freely confront the issue of humanization, where one could resist. And so I wanted to share, this is in New Orleans, Congo Square. How many people have heard of it or visited, seen it? So it was a place where, actually started with the American Indians who were indigenous to this community, and then during the periods of enslavement, it was a place on Sunday where people could gather. And there are many different Congo squares across the country. This one is just known in New Orleans, and it's still being reactivated by some of the activists today. But it was like a marketplace where you could find out the local news, find out, sell your goods, check in on people, ask about your family if you didn't know where they are. And it was just a place of resistance.
Well, a lot of drumming and dancing.
Lots of drumming and dancing.
Yeah.
This was just for me growing up in LA. Exposition Park was always the place where for birthday parties and all, you can go for free. And I just always felt like, wow, we have such a beautiful rose garden in our backyard. And so always appreciating the public parks. Before I came to Skid Row, I was thinking about why does Skid Row feel so familiar? So I had spent some time in Philadelphia, and one of the communities, specifically West Philadelphia, that I worked in on behalf of the councilperson was called Mantua. Mantua was a very economically depressed community. It had some of the highest infant mortality rates in the country, highest HIV, Christopher, and AIDS rate. And it sits right on the border of the University of Pennsylvania. So it always felt like the university was just waiting for this community to decay so it could go in and take over the land. In some ways, when I looked at it, updated just to try to see what was happening, it feels like that is what's happening, so it's a little scary. But this was back in, 2000 to 2006. And we did an initiative around 2001, 2002, called the Neighborhood Transformation Initiative. And so there were a lot of vacant lots in Philadelphia. People left, went south, went west, other places when the economy collapsed after many of the factories closed. And so what the city did was they said, okay, we'll go and reclaim vacant lots. But then it was like, well, you can clean up a lot, you could demolish a home, but how are you going to take care of it? So they partnered with the Horticultural Society to create these amazing urban green spaces. And every time we would just do plants, jazz shows. We partnered up with the Philadelphia Mural Program, so there was always a beautiful mural attached to the site. And then communities were able to just take those over. This is a larger park. This was a city park. There was a lot of drug dealing, a lot of shootings, different gang activity happening. So we were able to partner with Children's Hospital and reclaim this park, Malcolm X Park. And again, the programming is key. So we did jazz festivals, children's festival, the children's playground. People started doing family reunions and other events at the park. So that's what really kept it going. So it was through this experience and coming to Skid Row, I was like, oh, okay, this is like home. And meeting, there's some familiar faces up there, as you can see, including the late Kevin Michael, who told me and instructed Skid Row is a neighborhood. It's the largest recovery community, but it is a neighborhood. And I always appreciated that orientation because so many, especially coming from government, often think of it as, oh, it's about homeless services, it's about being an encampment. And it's like, no, this is an actual neighborhood, so how would you design and how would you allocate resources in any other neighborhood? You can keep it off if you want. Stay, please. They don't need to see me. It's the picture.
He passed it.
That is New York, right?
New York,
He
yeah.
passed away.
Yeah, he passed it.
Yeah. Can you see? Okay. You want the lights out? They want the lights out.
Lights out.
This is movie
I
time.
have it really clear. So I have to tell you a story. General Dogon and a couple of you will laugh. This picture, the darker one, is at San Julian. That was our first night. And we had, coordinated everything about having movies in the park, got permission to open up the park later. So of course we had to work with Central Division on, some of that coordination. So on that night, I think we had more police officers inside the park at the movie than we had community. And community was like, nope, we're not going. If the police are there, not happening. So some of us watched the Jesse Owens story that night, and some of us didn't. By the time we got to Gladys, soon to be General Jeff Park, the police, I don't think they even came, did they? And they definitely didn't enter the park.
They even asked us, why are we here? Like, that's a good question. Why
are you here?
Why are you here? Did you come to watch the movie?
Right? I remember Commander Leslie at that time, he's like, this is too much money, why are they here? And I was like, we don't know either. And as you can see, I forgot what the second movie was, but people were really attentive of that. And that was just a way of reclaiming space. It was a way, I think, for the mayor's office to understand and start seeing this is a neighborhood. And I forget, Charles, who was the person from Department of Recreation who helped us with the movies? For Nita or something?
I know we work closely with Belinda.
Belinda.
Yeah, Belinda Jackson. Yeah.
She was amazing because she said, she was the one, she said, yeah, this is every other park. We run the summer movie series at other parks. We need to do this in Skid Row too. So then this, becoming more familiar, understanding the community, working with OG, Charles, everyone, really understanding the push for toilets, appreciating the Dirty Divide reports that Ellie Can had done at the time, walking through, and it didn't make sense. Why were there only porta potties in the park? And why was the community responsible for cleaning and stocking the porta potties? And this is what pushed, and this is where I was telling Tom, I was like, there's some pieces, I'm gonna blame menopause. There's some pieces I'm like, wait, it's a little fuzzy, I can't remember. But it was after this that we met, I think, at City Hall first, and then we had the community meeting at UCEPP where we talked about what are the beautification things we can do for the community? How do we connect all these small projects, including bathrooms, lighting, redoing the sidewalks, clearing out the gutters, all of those kind of things. And so it began, just trying to understand how can we allocate and really looking at the budget and saying what are the resources, how do we allocate more resources for the budget, how do we educate the community, because we're going to need help for people showing up at the budget hearings to say, yes, keep this money for Skid Row, don't give it to, like at the time, there was funding, I think, for Union Rescue Mission, next door to 526, the showers and the laundry. There was like 3 spaces that.
I can't see the film. Henriëtte,
Did you say you were?
I'm in the front.
I can't see the film.
I know. I don't know. It's only for a second. I only got like 2 or 3 more.
Oh, that's why. Maybe it's not.
What is it?
She wants to see your face.
Oh, you guys have seen my face. You can see my back there. But I forgot now. Oh, so it's just important that we advocated for the budget because LASA and others were saying, oh, we're already funding toilets and bathrooms in Skid Row. And we're like, no, you should never have to ask for toilet paper. You shouldn't go to a restroom where there's no door on, the stall and all that kind of stuff. And so really working closely with the community, kind of inside and out, to do that advocacy.
Hollywood showed up.
I know, this is too much.
And this is kind of like a peek underneath the hood. Some of you guys will remember this. We started off just like, let's throw all the ideas on the board. What's already happening? What's working? What are the kind of places that you like? Why do you like them? So Hippie Kitchen, I think, is started up there. And, places where you felt safe, but you didn't need security officers. You didn't need police, those kind of things. We had, many of you will remember, I know some people didn't like our chicken dinners. Just true confession, that was just out of Zita and my pocket. But I would just tell you, that's all Zita and I could afford to host these meetings. They were like, we can't have 6 o'clock meetings and not offer food.
It was a good chicken.
So we tried.
She got hot sauce.
We tried. You see Eddie H at the head. He kept us on point, kept us on mission, made sure we were strategic. We had Deacon at the other end who kind of swayed us a little bit. We figured out ways to work it out. Someone would say something. wolf still a little bit from those meetings, but I think we met for 8 months.
Yes.
And in that time, worked out every detail and preparation. The first project was the Skid Row refresh spot.
Drop that trailer. Yeah.
So this was our meeting on the site. This was at the original site at 5th and Crocker. It was a site where Weingart is now under construction. We had to really work with Kevin Murray. I was like, look, we'll dig your sewer line for you. Let us have the site. You'll be okay. Because he's like, you can't delay my development. I was like, you're not ready yet anyway. We're good. We'll be in and out.
They just started.
And I know, they just started. So this is what the site looked like. I remember when we were on the site walking, we were begging for these trailers and trying to figure out what was the best way. So making sure we had laundry, the toilet, showers, that they were handicap accessible, etc. There was so much that we didn't know. And so it was like every point in the development, something new came forward and we just said, we'll just figure it out.
We were fighting Hurricane Trina for the delivery. There was a hurricane, that's why we couldn't
Oh,
get
that's
our trailers.
right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. That's why they were delayed.
What we fighting because they had the Hurricane Trina?
Back east or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a whole thing about, and then were the trailers ADA compliant, and then
Yeah.
how could we get them on the ground? It was,
And they dropped one trailer.
I know. This person, this is Mr. Gerald, just want to give him a shout out because, again, not knowing construction and just moving this project forward, and when we had to dig the sewer lines, he just worked for Department of Sanitation. He said, don't worry about it, we got you. He's like, we see what you guys are doing for the people, we're gonna come and dig the lines. So without him, we wouldn't have had a refresh spot. We didn't tell everyone the story, we just honored him and just kept it going because I still don't think we got the bill. This was, I know Catherine was instrumental. We had Architect Studio 42 came out, but it was, you know, we were doing the planters because we wanted to beautify it before the beginning. And I know, Charles, this was big about the design, that it's around wellness, so it should be life with fresh plants and artwork. I know Catherine came that day and she's like, wait a minute, you're gonna kill the trees if you don't do it this way, and what's the watering plan, and all of that. So it was the first time I learned that you could put styrofoam into a planter and then put the plant in and it helps with the water and all that. But this is the crew. The community was very adamant about having homeless health care as the provider. I think our initial safety officer. It wasn't chrysalis. We got Goodwill to do kind of the cleaning and the maintenance for the local hire. Of course, we had UCEPP there for our peer ambassadors, and then we had the WE team for safety.
And there's Evan Clark, he's still there.
This was the day. Where's Dogon? This is Dogon's favorite part of the welcoming or the opening ceremony. But we had our Ashe drummers. We had Brother Charles there on the mic. And I know, you know, it's controversial. You know, you like the mayor, you don't like the mayor, etc. We did the certificates that day because so often the contribution and labor of communities of color in developing initiatives is often quickly forgotten. And we didn't want that to happen. So we did certificates, which kind of create, with every certificate, you have to fill out paperwork to have it done. So it goes into like a public record.
Yes.
Plus we wanted all of you to have a public record to show that you were a part of it and you made this happen.
And that was
So that's what we did, the certificates.
That was the reason, to get notary publicly, you put in work.
And then, of course, the refresh spot is expanding, although I know we need new trailers, I think, right? Because it was still the same ones.
They did some repairs on the showers and they did some repairs on the toilet, so.
Okay.
They did some repairs. They also put in a new awning. Charles, you can speak to some of that stuff.
Yeah. And I think that was it. Yep, that was it. See, I'm short and sweet.
That was awesome just to see, and the other link, that Alisa was really instrumental in just supporting the community advocacy and helping community folks really connect the vision with resources, because that's what happens a lot of times, is that people have great ideas, but they're not able to implement their ideas because they don't have the resources. And so we can never thank Alisa enough for taking the time to listen. And she listened to all the community advocates, all the folks that people say you need to talk to these people. She talked to them. She sat down, she listened to them, and the other link to this part discussion is the fact that all of the great stuff we were doing in the parks and the energy we were creating, people wanted to feel that at the refresh spot. They said that at some of the community meetings, they said, what y'all do in the parks, we want the refresh spot to feel like that. And so they were acknowledging that we were doing something collectively in the community that they wanted to see replicated. So that's part of this story, and the folks here have been a part of it.
Let me say, because one of the things about...
You know Henriëtte is next.
Yeah.
Nah, go ahead.
I'm not going to look, Charles. There he is, stopping the mic. One of the things about Lisa is she really guided us, because she knew what would be acceptable. She knew what the city would and would not do.
Yeah.
And so she was always there mentoring us along to make the right decision, to do it the right way. And you know, even though sometimes it got frustrating, she kept us on point, she kept us informed, and she helped us to develop a place that exists. And the whole, let me tell you something, the whole establishment uses the refresh spot, just like we planned it. That it would be a place that place serviced 25,000 people in 1 month. When you have that type of accessibility to the people down here, that's the best place of public engagement that this place has ever had.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I appreciate that. I'm gonna pass the mic to Henriëtte, our very own Henriëtte, and have Henriëtte just share. We know this space here is the History Archive Museum, so everything you want to know about what we talking about is somewhere here. If it's not in one of these folders, there's a video, there's some documents, there's photos, it's here. So shout out to that blessing for us to be able to tell our history. Because people outside of Skid Row don't know any of this history. They don't even know how things came to be. But we also need to all be able to celebrate what we've done and the advocacy, and let folks know this is a neighborhood, this is a community that continues to fight. So shout out to that. But the Skid Row Artist Festival is really something I take a lot of pride in when I talk about Skid Row. And because we have such a vibrant community, I'm like, do you know it's a 2-day festival that's been occurring for years? They're like, a 2-day festival in Skid Row? And so Henriëtte, if you could tell us about the festival and whatever we need to know, your reflections and your engagement in the parks. No pressure.
Yes. And I say 2 days is not enough, because we could keep going and going. Yeah. Hey, Catherine. Yeah, well, yeah, so this last year was the 14th festival for all Skid Row artists. Yeah. 14 years. And I just want to immediately give a shout out to Sean, because he has been, the stage manager for 14 years. And that is so amazing. It is people who have been dedicated to keep doing it for 14 years, because we just did it really on the fly when we started. Because people probably know the history. We were asked by Americans for the Art to write a report about us, how LAPD is serving the community, and we said, we don't want to write about us, we want to write about the artists that there are in the community and find out who they are, where they make their art, and write about that. And so that's really how it started. We had 5 community convenings in different places, because we didn't have our own space. So we did one at Jenham right here. We did one at UCEPP, right? We had a lunch and we had a big talk there. So yeah, at the Church of the Nazarene, we did it in 5 different places with a lot of input from different community members. And then John wrote this report with Maria Rosario Jackson from the Animating Democracy at that time. And basically what we found out is that it's a community that is rich with culture, and people make it where they are. It comes from the ground up. It's not something that is facilitated, like now we're going to do something, but people do it because that is their need, and that's how things grow in Skid Row. And then people, the researchers said, like, why don't you do a big research and get the data? And we were like, how are we going to get the data? We are not going to walk around with computers and write it all down. John had a brilliant idea, and he said, let's do a festival. Everybody who is an artist, just come and show us your art. Just do it. Let's create a space for it. And so one of the things, of course, that we found was that there were no spaces to create art. At that time, even Studio 526, was still the LAMP workshop, but it wasn't open for the whole community. The only art that was being made here and there was facilitated within the missions, but it was only for the people who live in the missions. That was actually LAPD was the only place where it was open, where anybody could come in and come out, right? So and then it happened in the parks and on the streets. And Walter, I remember, was one of the people that really spoke out, and he said, we are the drummers, and Dion Joseph keeps locking us up and taking away our drums, and we have no space to even drum in the streets, right? And people were being harassed wherever they made their art. So we said, and actually we had 2 Dutch interns at the time, and Kevin Michael, who all connected really hard. And they were like, okay, we said like, okay, we're gonna do it next month on a Saturday. We're gonna just do it in Gladys Park. And everybody started running around Skid Row and say, hey, you wanna come and perform, or you have something to show? And that's how it started. And we did it one day. And I remember Clyde Casey. Did people remember Clyde Casey? Clyde Casey was here because we did it's a whole different story. He was here. Clyde Casey had, in the time that LAPD actually was like in 80, around the 80s, 90s. When was that, John? He had another planet.
It was for a year or so, about 88.
Yeah, 88. Yeah, there was an abandoned gas station on Wall and Boyd, and there was another planet. That was the only also outdoor space that where 24/7 you could make art there, and. There was a piano, and there was some space to draw, and people did performances, and he was here, and he created these drum rigs and then he walked through the streets, and a lot of people could just sort of hang on to it and connect people drumming while they were doing them. So he was also totally into it, and he came to the first art festival because now he lives. Well, he died also. So many people have passed away. Yeah, but so he was there. That's how it started, and it was such a success that everybody just came out, and it was so nice to again see the whole community come out, and just everybody was supporting each other. And it was really that was the plan from the beginning. Anybody who identifies as an artist is an artist. And they can do what they do, and and people supported each other, and people appreciated each other, and it was just really beautiful. And then we decided to do it the next year, and the next year, and then a big tree fell in Gladys Park, and we had to cancel it. That was terrible. And move it to January or February, and then but we didn't want to give up, so we did it again in October, and so it became this festival that happens in October. It was really organized by the community, and we didn't want to do also something like for the community, like let's bring in a big band and then everybody can enjoy the music. No, it was really the people from the community, with the community, for the community, and you know, and that's how we did it. Like Austin was like instrumental, really, in lining everybody up, because the more we planned it, you know, we tried to like make a program and say like, are you okay? You want to do it? Okay, 1 o'clock you're on. Of course, then the people don't show up at 1 o'clock. And so somebody else has to go in. So it has always been very fluent, and somehow we pull it off. Because the other thing is we don't try to have big gaps in it. So like, oh yeah, now we have to have a big setup, and so now there's nothing happening for 15 minutes. But then, you know, somebody else reads a poem, and then behind them we set up the band. We sort of found a way to keep it going. And then, of course, there was Hayk, who came, and really, I think the doodles came from the park, because Hayk started saying like, okay, we need to make a community painting. We have to have a team. And we pulled 2 tables together on the basketball court with a huge paper. And over 2 days, people made this, like what you see here. It was a community drawing, and we, you know, I gave them back to you a few years ago. But yeah, we have like, I don't know how many. Each festival has produced this beautiful community painting. And yeah, and then, you know, it sort of grew out, and there came more creativity stations, and now we also had, you know, everybody piece by piece. We had woodworks last year. People that come back every time, like Crucial, you know, and then I have to mention Frank's melting pot. Everybody remember Frank Foster? Yeah. And that was like so beautiful. I just met him in the street when he was still living at the VA. He just came out of prison, and he was like, you know, I'm a musician and I want to do something for the community. And it was like, oh, okay, you know, and just keep talking about it. And I said, okay, come, we do a festival, whatever you want to do. And he came with this whole gospel choir the first time. That was pretty amazing. And then, you know, and then he started working on bringing music into the prisons, bringing guitars there. And he just kept working on it, and he kept working in the community and bringing more musicians out and bringing people together. So every year he came with a different band, really. And you just saw him grow over the years, and that was really beautiful. Also passed away. But I think that is sort of like what you see over all these years, these 14 years, you have seen people grow. And you have seen people connect in so many ways, and those relationships keep going, and they are still here, and yeah, it's just a really beautiful thing. Yeah, and then the other thing is that since we have the festival, we started, and because of us, so we also like, I don't know, somehow we are archivists, I guess, always, because we didn't think about an archive, but we really felt like we needed to interview the artists to sort of document who the people are. So we started quite in the beginning already, making a space where we interviewed the artists to learn a little bit more about their art and how they made it, and etc. So we have now this huge archive of interviews with all these people, and in these interviews a lot of people also come back, and so you can also hear the stories of people through the years. It's pretty amazing. And then of course since the community comes out and everybody is there, it's also a place where we always have had a spot for community issues. So you know, Skid Row now in 2040 has always had a space there. So we informed. We have the Department of City Planning came to talk about the community plan, which is now going to the Planning and Land Use Committee. And I just cannot. I have to tell you, this is the moment that we have been working for like 6 years. And the Planning and Land Use Committee is going to decide, we hope, because it's still not officially agendized, but we are really thinking it's going to happen at the end of April. That's the last meeting, and they are going to decide whether we keep our IX1 zone, which we created, which means no market rate housing in that zone. And a lot more things that we actually got, you know, through all these interactions, green space, accountability for the community members, having a say in what is happening in our community. So we are having a press conference on the 18th, next week, Tuesday, at 1 o'clock at the Hippie Kitchen. And you guys should come, because we have to advocate for our plans. And we've been doing that at the festival. Every year you can see it grow, and you can see the next step and what is happening. So yeah, the festival is in many ways sort of a special place for the community to come together, to support each other, to enjoy each other, but also to organize. Yeah. That's all I'm going to say.
That was awesome. I wanted to save your thought time for you. I'm about to open it up for questions in 1 second. I did want to make a few comments, and then we'll open it up for feedback and for questions for our panelists. And that is, I wanted to comment to one thing Hayk mentioned about having this event weekly, and this concept of just people having a sense of comfort knowing that there's a regular activity or event. So anytime there are festivals, there are events, people always ask, when is the next one, where will it be? I want to bring my friend, I want to show up, I want to perform, next time I want to get involved. So just the importance of what that means to the community is really central, this sense of stability and regularity. And I think me working in the community so long, just to see that, I really value the whole, what's the grapevine? Like folks just spread the word. It's like, hey, did you hear about this? It happens. When does it happen? Oh, once a week. And that's just folks that are behind the scenes that just continue to be accessible. That's important for community folks. Another thing you mentioned that I jotted down about the flow. So you were talking about the flow when you facilitate the, and I had the honor of facilitating the Artist Festival 1 year. But that is something that I think over the years, we've developed kind of like a expectation of what happens at community events. And part of it is flow. The flow, the timing, like things have to continue, the energy has to be consistent. And that is something that you create a sense of energy. And it's noticeable when the event is over. You may not notice it until the event is over, but while you're in the midst of it, it's almost like I want to say, what's this term people use? A sound bath. It's like a sound bath. It's the energy that you're creating is positively affecting folks for as long as your event is. And the challenge as a facilitator is to keep that energy consistent for that time. But we've done a great job in linking that energy to health fairs as well. So we started doing that in Skid Row, just having people bring the health resources and doing health fairs and having and music playing. And folks, at first, some people were like, oh my God, how can we provide health services and the music is playing and people are performing and you know, all this stuff is happening at once. But that's really like the spirit of what we've done is just having a space for multiple things all happening at the same time. And the last point I want to make before I open it up for questions and comments is just how we use our parks to celebrate life. I think that's something I don't want to minimize. That I know there have been at least 2 marriages in Skid Row parks. So at least 2 people have been married. There have been also birthday parties, but we also use the parks to acknowledge people who pass away. And so I think that's important to show, like, parks really are spaces to just acknowledge people's humanity and the things that they experience. And so I want to uplift that because, and even when we're not formally doing things, people are setting up memorials when people pass away in the park. It's just something that is part of community. So I think that I just want to acknowledge that's really key, and acknowledge, you mentioned Frank's Melting Pot, Matt Horns that just passed away. He also played with Frank. Really instrumental to it, just all of the park activities. He was just an encyclopedia of information about rodent control and plants. Expert. He actually was he wanted to start a bird watching program in the park, and he got the equipment, and he started organizing, and right before he passed, he mentioned he was going to do it originally in the parks, but then he was going to do it at the Star Apartments, and so just want to acknowledge his contribution to the community. And one thing I forgot to mention as well is just the importance of uplifting culture. Everybody kind of touched on it, but this year was this banner that's created here, 23 and We. That was our theme for our Black History Month celebration, but this year was our 23rd year, so just showing that there are festivals and events that have been happening for decades that show the importance of what it is that we do as a neighborhood, as a community, but the importance of uplifting culture and engaging folks, involving them in what we do, and all of that really has a collective impact of improving health and wellness in our communities and safety.
So one of the themes we've heard tonight is the importance of advocacy necessary to get anything accomplished. So I just wanted to add something that's specific to the parks based on what Henriëtte was saying about how important this 6-year process of Skid Row now in 2040, like the next 2 weeks are like the climax to the 6-year process. So what the plan has right now, and this is totally due to advocacy and community input, is 20 positive recommendations around land use. And the title city planning gave to their work was recognizing Skid Row as a neighborhood. So here's of the 20 recommendations, and 4 or 5 of them, if they get implemented, would involve the parks in a big way, though they don't literally mention the parks in the recommendation. But here's the one that is completely focused on the park. So I want to say this to understand, like, if you're going to be successful at advocacy, you won't be successful if you're operating in a vacuum. You have to get connected to other things and build on other things and initiate things that other people can be built on. If you think you can do it by yourself, or your nonprofit do it by yourself, it's not going to work. It just simply will not work. So here's what city planning has that folks who want to be advocates for the parks should now be building on. Okay, even though the plan's not been finished, they're not going to yank this one out. So this one is, this one's in it. So build on it. Recognize the significant role that San Julian Park and Gladys Park serve as public realm assets and symbols of local history. Support efforts to memorialize such assets and sustain their presence in the community through ongoing and effective maintenance, community programs, and services. So here's the foundation that City Hall is providing folks to make this come to life, because they probably won't be able to do it even if they want to. It has to be the community partnering to make this come to life, to get the funding and all that kind of stuff for it to become reality. Because obviously some people in City Hall want this to become reality, or it wouldn't be in this document. That was a speech.
But I would also like to add, is in that document because of our advocacy.
Oh yeah, good point.
So they listened to what we were saying.
They took our thoughts and wrote it in their language.
That's right. But we need to advocate that it gets adopted.
Okay, I just first of all always want to thank the Most High, and also John and Henriëtte for giving us space to do this, to come together, and everyone. Yeah, and what I want to say is that, I was very close to Matthew, and we were very good friends, and I want to, lift him up now, and in bringing life, like with Catherine and the planting of trees, especially because we create community, and that is culture. And I don't want to sound negative, but it is a voice from the Most High. When we create a positive change in a traditionally toxic neighborhood, which is ours. So we bring this life, okay? Because if we don't, they're coming to destroy it. And where there is toxicity, the toxicity is self-destructive, okay? So I know brothers want to keep the vibe, well, it's cool, don't. But if it's toxic, we have to raise the vibration. We have to raise the frequency. I can't be a hypocrite because I wish, I was consistently on the levels of an Alisa or Henriëtte or John or OG or Catherine or Iron, anyone that is, and Ron, but brothers out there every day doing that, and John, okay, and Clancy every day. You understand? I had to take a little leave of absence, but what I think is that I would like to see more of the space being positive. I walk around, I don't like to see my sisters naked. Okay, and everybody like, oh, don't say nothing about it, it's all good. No, it's not all good. It's not. Because I could be out there any day, but I choose not to. Okay? But that's the box they put women like me in. Okay, and the weed and the meth, there people who smoke weed, don't hit me, okay? Meth and, and that's not good. And what I would like to do and sing what is beautiful here, and not just in you beautiful people, but in us bringing in, because if we don't, the city where there is toxicity, it will not survive.
Michelle brought up another point that I didn't touch on around health and wellness is we've been making an effort at all our community events to make sure that Narcan access is available to address the overdose epidemic is one, and the other is to distribute HIV self-test kits. So a few things that we have that we try to just connect with our community events around public health. And to Michelle's point about the folks on the panel right here are doing that, are putting positive energy in the park. So we always need more of that. But I want to say that's something also I'm very intentional about whenever we do community events. And I talked a little bit about it earlier, talking in a calm voice on the microphone, but it's something else that happens when you project positive energy. People feel that positive energy.
When I first came to Skid Row, it was in 2014, and first thing I did was stay at the URM, and I stayed for a month because I wasn't going to pay them the $210 a month. I was getting out of there as fast as I could, and I ended up at the Russ. And it was 2014 in November, and this is what I saw: the wedding. The wedding. And I couldn't believe it. I was on my way back to the Russ, and I had to be in, you had to be in at a certain time. And I was rushing back to get there, and I stopped because St. Julian Park was all cleaned up. And this woman who was getting married in the park had these tables with linen. She had it catered. They were putting not paper plates, china on the tables. She had a full band. And I'm standing there looking, I'm supposed to be going inside. I'm thinking like this, I could see as much as I could. So I had to go in, and I went to the second floor because that's where my space was. And I went to the bathroom so I could look out the window because the second floor bathroom looked right into St. Julian Park. And I stood there and I watched. And she had a minister. She had them on the dice, the thing there. And her guests came in. And I'm going to tell you, this was at night. Everybody was dressed to the T. Everybody. I mean, they were in gowns, and the men were in their tux. And then I remember her bridesmaids coming in. And I thought, oh my God, these are the best looking bridesmaids I've ever seen. And my thought was, this woman has class. Not just class, but I said to myself, she must have had another life where she did this kind of thing, you know, and that she wasn't, you know, like what you would say, everybody's talking about, you know, the people that smoke dope and all that kind of stuff. Not everybody does. And the other thing was that her husband-to-be came in, and then she came with her dad. I'm gonna assume it was her dad. And it was beautiful. I mean, she was beautiful. Everything was just so beautiful. I just stood there, and my thought was, wow, even in Skid Row, you can find love, get married, and have a beautiful wedding. And it changed my whole perception, because I'd only been there for a little while, but the idea to be happy, that you could be happy and joyous. And I found that out one night. I was coming back with some friends from dinner, and there was a guy in front of us, and there was across the street by the Wine Guard, they were playing Smokey Robinson, okay? And he was just singing, oh, he was singing. And what we did was I said, we're gonna go dance with him. So we did, we danced around him and we were singing, and I thought, oh, wow, it hit me. I can be happy. I don't have to walk around being sad or gloomy or any of that. It was like, it's a lie.
Big shout out to Coach Ryan. I've been here since 2008. Basically, you know, never ever going to the parks. Never went to the parks. I did enjoy mapping and canvassing the community and just looking at all the people and understanding why the community the way it was. I did enjoy cleaning up, you know, and then I started enjoying feeding people too. I was like, oh, okay, you know, cleaning up, feeding people, observing people, talking to people. So I got that in place, and just by me feeding, you know, the cities, you know, the city told me, they said, hey, Coach, you guys are doing such a great effort of cleaning up. Won't you guys extend that and bring the street feeders in and manage that for us? And this was Antonio Villaraigosa, the mayor, and Jane Perry was the council person at the time. And they reached out to us and like, hey, you know, work alongside of us to manage the street feeding. And they actually gave me Gladys Park. They said, hey, go to Gladys Park, it's run by SRO. Let them know we sent you there. Any issues you have, let us know. I went down there, talked to SRO at the time who was running the park, OG, all of us. We came down there. General Jeff was very inspirational. We started a basketball league down there, and it was really chaotic to me because it was like, well, a basketball league around a lot of drug dealing, a lot of gang banging, a lot of just, you know, just out of order. It was just out of order. And I just looked at the whole situation. I said, you know what, as a coach, this is what I do, right? I get you in order, right? I bring the physical fitness and the well-being in the direction, as well as rewards, to what I do. And so that's why I came to Gladys Park. I came to understand that the park is, from where I'm coming from, Pasadena and Altadena, you know, we always had sports leagues, right? Not just rec, but leagues. And we always had, you know, art, chessboards, checkers, board games, restrooms. You know, we utilized it to a degree that it incorporated community. And I didn't see that in Gladys Park. I didn't see no incorporation of community. All I seen was, you know, anarchy. And I know a lot of people are kind of like, F the police, F this, F that, F that. But where I come from, we don't do that. So even though people did that, we didn't. I didn't. But I understood that to make a change, you got to change from the inside out, not from the outside in. And so that's where we started. We started from the inside out. That means we addressed the community, we addressed the drug dealers, the drug users. We incorporated them not only with the league, but with opportunities to earn income. And by doing that, it put us on a platform that no other park in all of LA has. That means we're the only community that has a key to Gladys Park. We open and close that park, we open and close the alley. And nowhere else in LA, nowhere else, that the community has ownership of that park, but Gladys. And everybody look at Gladys and says, how in the world has it been done? And it has been done by the community. We have been a spark plug to instigate the inside out concept, but remember, LA Can, everybody who just, who has an opinion, who wants to help, who want to exhibit their passion, who wants to utilize the park has always been welcome. And Gladys Park, unlike San Julian, has always been a park that has been saying, we are inclusive, come in, come share. Like some said, they want to meditate, some want to pray, some want to relax, but we all are welcome, and that's the only park that says we love from the inside out and not from the outside in.
It was really burning to ask you, could the park could possibly be named after you? Charles Porter, Parks and Recreation? I believe I see that happening. The passion is there. You have really great information in.
You flatter me with your accolades. I will say this though, and I talked about in my opening comments, and I'll make these my closing comments.
And the plane circle
as the plane landed. I was actually
the plane circled around.
I just want to say, we stand on the shoulders of people that came before us. And as I started out, I wasn't the first person advocating in parks. I do want to highlight something Coach Ron said and something Linda said as well, that I don't want to overlook the fact that not everything that happens in the park is wonderful, but I will say the people in the park are part of the community, and they do listen. They listen, they're engaged, they're connected. And even though you think people are completely ignoring you, they're not. We would do activities in the park, and folks that were hustling in the park would stop hustling to watch the event. There were folks that would want to come and get on the mic, and we used to put rules on them. It's like, well, if you get on the mic, you got to keep it clean. All right, I'll try to keep it clean. And the people that we put labels on are people. They have family members. They vilify folks and say, oh, they sell drugs, or they're gang members, or they're people. Yeah. And when you create a healthy space, it's healthy for them as well. And they appreciate it. And we have testimony of folks that just came back and it's like, you the guy that was in the park, or you part of this, or you did that. I'll never forget, man, there was one time that this happened. And so there's power in us doing positive things in the park. So I want to just uplift that and engaging folks, not putting labels on folks, because when you're not in the park, who's in the park? A lot of times they're the people keeping the safety in the park. They're the people regulating the arguments and the fights. Hey, cut that out. Hey, you get out the park. Hey, stop. We don't need that right here. And so, that's something I just want to, because we don't have the capacity to be in the park every day. We're there once a week, if we're there once a month, if we're there a couple times a year, but I just want to highlight that, and I do want to say that I just want to thank the folks that spoke today, the folks that just showed up. All of us have contributed to making our neighborhoods better, and some folks, I have been here a long time, but people have been here longer than me.